I was in a very bad car accident. I lost the ability to walk. At this point in time, I figured, well, my husband will at least stay with me. But it turns out he didn't want any part of this. He divorced me pretty quick after he found out that I'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life and left me with my elderly father, who by the way is over 70, and he has to deal with me now. But what I did not expect was the fact that my ex-husband not only ran away from me, but he took our kids with him, and he lied to them over the years saying it was I who ran away. Well, guess what? Karma has a little thing to say. Hey guys, this is Logan, mother of 2 children, Sean, 19, and Rick, 15. My story goes back to the time when I was married to my husband, Evan, who's 51. Evan and I have been married for 13 years, when one fateful day, I was met with an accident. I was driving back home after dropping off my kids at school. A speeding vehicle came from the opposite direction and rammed into my car. The next I remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, immobile, covered in bandages and plasters, surrounded by nurses. I was coming in and out of consciousness, and when I saw the nurse calling my husband and father, who were waiting outside. The doctor congratulated me on surviving such a tragic accident, but he had terrible news. He said that my lower half of my body was paralyzed, and I just might never walk again. I was devastated. I broke down. My father asked the doctor if the physiotherapist could help in any way, and the doctor said that my condition was very critical, and the chances of me getting back to my feet were slim, even with a good physiotherapist. I spent the next 6 months in a hospital room, staring out the window, waiting for my family to come by. I looked forward to that 30 minutes when my children would visit me in the evening, and I felt sorry for them because they had to endure so much at such a tender age. Yet, they motivated me to stay strong, and it broke my heart to know they were cooking and cleaning by themselves. My father offered to take care of the children, but Evan declined, stating that they should learn life skills to be independent individuals. Initially, my husband visited with the kids daily, but as the days passed, he did not bring the kids, saying he came directly from the office and he brought them only when I cried and begged him to bring them. I said if he was too busy to pick up the children, my father could bring them to visit me. He said that the children would be infected by the frequent hospital visits, and I was just baffled at his response, but held myself back. Eventually, his visits became scarce, from daily to weekly and fortnightly, and sometimes he would just come pay the visits of the hospital bills and leave without even seeing me. My father noticed his changing behavior and asked me to stay strong. I was too weak at the time, both mentally and physically. Evan often said I should not be complaining about his infrequent visits or cold behavior. Instead, I should be grateful that he was paying my hospital bills. Most husbands abandon their wives after such an accident. The change in his behavior was evident. Sometimes I ignored it, thinking he was just frustrated and tired of the dual responsibility of managing the house, the kids, the medical bills. On most nights, I just could not help but cry myself to sleep. I waited for the day to be moved to the wheelchair so that I could return to my home and my children. Finally, after 6 months of a long wait, the day arrived, and I still remember that day so vividly. The doctor was waiting for my husband to arrive and complete some formalities before my plasters could be removed. But Evan did not show up, and neither did he answer any calls. My father signed all the documents, and that heavy burden of plaster was removed from my limbs, and I was moved to the wheelchair, and when we were about to leave the hospital, Evan arrived. He requested the nurses and my father to give us some space. I was surprised at his unexpected request, and after everything, he said,
"You know, you can never stand on your feet again, right?"
Tears welled up in my eyes as my heart sensed what would happen next.
"Certainly, I just cannot spend the rest of my life with a cripple. So, here's divorce papers. I've transferred some money into your account to cover you for a few months, and after that, your father needs to find a way."
I was numb. I just kept staring at him, struggling to find a word. Seeing me staring at him, he said,
"Oh, come on now. Don't start your emotional drama. I've delivered all my marital duties until now, but I've got to think about the children's future as well. They can't be raised by a handicap. I'm getting a new mother for them shortly. They'll be fine."
He laid clear terms that he would not go for joint custody. It would be either I who take the full custody or he gets it. I definitely could not get full custody because my physical and financial conditions were in shambles, so it was evident that he would get the custody. I just wanted to yell, scream, abuse, and beat the crap out of him. Yet all I did was stood there frozen, and he placed the papers on the table and left. Soon after that, my father entered the room, and I guess he somewhat had sensed it to be coming. He saw the divorce papers and patted my shoulders to be strong. My father took me to his home, where he lived alone after my mom's demise, and as I entered the house, I realized how lonely it would have been for him. I was so busy with my family that I never cared for him, but he stood with me, strong. He was there at the hospital every single day, and maybe because he knew how terrible it felt to be lonely. I tried to contact Evan and convince him against the divorce. I assured him that I would not become a burden on myself, and tried to manage by myself as much as possible, but he remained unruffled. I desperately called some of Evan's relatives to help me reconcile with him. Evan's parents divorced when he was very young, and they parted ways and barely connected with Evan or his sister Lucy. The only family member Evan ever had was Lucy. I called her too for help, but she sided with Evan and remarked the divorce was the most logical move. She added that a wheelchair-bound wife is a huge liability, and Evan was still young to be trapped by a crippled wife. I was stunned at her assertiveness. Had it been the present day, I would have given her an earful answer, but back then I was desperate to get back with Evan, mainly for the sake of my children. After howling and crying for a month, I finally signed the divorce papers on Evan's terms. He laid out a condition of non-shared custody. He said that if I met my children, I would influence them against their father and stepmom. The kids needed to be away from me to bond with their stepmom, and my case was evidently weak because I was paralyzed. My lawyers said that I would not get custody because I did not have any source of income, and I was wheelchair-bound and dependent on my father, who, by the way, was in his late 70s. Eventually, I had to give up. I spent the next few months in deep depression, locking myself in my room. I did not open the windows. I did not let the sunshine enter. I ghosted my physiotherapist. I almost turned, to bad thoughts. My father enrolled me in counseling, but I also turned that down. Finally, my father talked me out to that, though, and he said that if I hurt myself, I would be taking 2 lives, mine and his. I was his only hope, which was getting him to going into his 70s. He said that he did not raise me to see me get destroyed, and he always wanted me to be an independent woman. He was unhappy with my decision to leave the job after the marriage, and he insisted I take charge of my life and not let the adversity determine my life. His words somehow helped me, and my father got me some white canvas and sketches, and, I could stay distracted and heal from the turmoil. He rented out 1/3 of the house to cover my expenses, and as a teenager, I aspired to be a designer. I used to work for a boutique to design their clothes, but after the birth of my elder son, my husband insisted that I stay home and take care of the house. Somehow it made sense to me then, but I deeply regretted it later. When I started sketching again, I realized that the artist in me was still alive, and it motivated me to take charge of my life. I took my physiotherapy seriously and enrolled in counseling as well, and soon enough I could go out alone on my arms and upper body strength. I improved my sketches, even took online crash courses to improve my sketching skills in the latest trend. I contacted my previous boss, the owner of the boutique where I previously worked, and she said that she had retired. However, her daughter has taken over the business and opened several more outlets. She referred me to her daughter, and after reviewing my designs, she asked me to sketch a few samples according to her requirement. So, I submitted my samples according to her briefing, and, well, long story short, I was hired. That was the turning point of my life because I simply felt alive again. I worked hard, really hard to understand the client's requirements and studied the latest design, learned new tools, and so on. I literally killed it. During the time, my father tried to get my grandchildren to visit me, but Evan, his new wife Margaret, got a restraining order against us, stating that we were manipulating the kids against her and they had enough money to get good lawyers, but I did not, so I was to keep in my lane. Some of Evan's relatives kept in touch with me and informed me that the children were manipulated against me. They were told I held them responsible for my accident because it happened while I was returning from their school. It was I who had refused to go home after the discharge, and it was I who had abandoned them. That was the reason their father was forced to remarry. The children hated me. Coming to the present day last week, while I was busy attending the customers at my boutique, I heard a familiar voice saying my name. It was Evan. By the way, a year ago, I rented a small commercial space to set up my boutique, and I turned back to Evan standing near the counter, and he looked far older than his age. With a pale face and dropped shoulders, that sight brought back all the harrowing memories of the last 8 years. Before I could even react, he said, do you work here? My cashier replied to him that I owned the boutique, and he was shocked to see me running a boutique attending to the customers all in a wheelchair. I took him aside and simply asked him to leave. He wanted to speak to me, but I refused. He pleaded to give him one chance just to justify himself, but with all that and his new wife had done, I pushed him away, saying that it was business hours for my boutique and I could not waste it on him. I left him standing at the corner to attend to my customers, and he left the store shortly after. He came back again the following day when the footfall was low, and he urged me to listen to him just once, and he begged. I kept shooing away him until he said it was relevant to our children. He told me that karma had already taken revenge on him, and soon after his marriage with his new wife Margaret, sent the children to boarding school, citing that they were intruding on their private life. Evan was too much in love with her to contest her decision. Later, she transferred the house to her name, making Evan's life absolutely dreadful. They have a 7-year-old daughter. She left the job soon after the marriage and lived lavishly on his income, and she and her daughter both disrespect the crap out of Evan. She even hosts these parties at the house, but get this, she does not invite Evan's relatives. In fact, Evan's mistreated by her friends and relatives and mocked as well. A curmudgeon. He said he wanted a divorce, but that would bring him to the streets, and the house was in her name, and she would claim alimony and child support, plus he was going to be taking care of Sean and Rick. He would be absolutely broke. He sobbed as he narrated this, and even claimed he was vulnerable after my accident, desperately looking for a wife to care for the kids. Margaret was his office junior, and she tricked Evan into marrying her to eventually get the home. After he was done, I told him that I didn't care whether he got avenged or not, and rebuked him for sending the kids to boarding school at such a tender age. I mean, the youngest one was 7 at the time of our divorce. I blasted him for saying he married only for his children when his lust got him to Miss Margaret. He said that he wanted to repent for his mistakes and simply wanted me back. I asked him to get the children and confess everything that he's done to them and me. He agreed to bring the children to me this weekend and confessed. However, he turned up again yesterday. He said it was a deal that we get back together once he straightened up the matter with the children, but I denied it outrightly on getting back to him. He was trying to paint a happy family picture in my mind, but I yearned for my family for many moons. If this had been offered to me in the initial years after my divorce, I might have taken it shamelessly. But now I've come a long way, you know. I've made it clear that the reconciliation is not on the table. Besides, he was married to Margaret and had a daughter. Getting rid of her would cost him a fortune, but that's a separate discussion. I'm not at all thinking about getting back with him. I discussed this with my father, who warned me against Evan's manipulation, and he said, "Hey, Evan lost his house, staying as a guest in his own home. Sean and Rick despise him for sending them away, and even though he pays for their schooling, his current wife and daughter treat him no less than a doormat. He's just a lonely man." He added that the relatives and neighbors suspect Margaret's of an affair because they have noticed the presence of a man in the house when Evan was away.
One of the relatives told my father that Evan was once heard yelling at Margaret, claiming
that the daughter was not his and that he was going to get a DNA test done. This information got me thinking that it could also be possible that he already knew about my business. That's why he wants to get back to me. I don't know what to do next. I'm excited to meet my children after 8 years, but I'm equally nervous that Evan would pester me for a patch-up. Some of my friends suggest that he had the taste of his medicine and now I should give a chance to my married life. Guys, I just need some advice. Does my accident and being wheelchair-bound justify his actions? Please let me know. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. Oh boy, today's story is a wild one. We do have multiple updates to get in, 2 of them in fact. If you're new to the channel and you want more daily videos, hit that subscribe button underneath this video. It helps support the channel a lot, and I really appreciate it. Here is update number 1. Thanks, guys, for all the support. A deep chat conversation with some of you helped me clarify my situation, so here's the thing. As I mentioned in my original post, Evan brought the children to me, although they were not ready to meet. Neither Evan nor me. They hated Evan and me for abandoning them apparently, but somehow Evan convinced them to one meeting. The older one, Sean, is in college, while the younger one, Rick, is still at high school, and they both stay in their dorms. I broke down after seeing them for 80 years. They've grown double the size, and they too got emotional on seeing me, but they held back their emotions. Evan narrated the truth as how it was, and he and Margaret, who forbade me from seeing them at all. My father was present during the confrontation, and he added how he was being chased away whenever he tried to reach them.
Witness tears rolled down their cheeks
as the truth got unveiled, and they hugged me. They apologized for hating me and getting manipulated by Evan and Margaret, and their eyes turned red with anger. Evan broke down in front of us, asking for forgiveness, and he said he had done everything he could to provide the best for us. The children reminded him that he had another wife and another daughter, and hey, he should be with them.
They counted how Margaret tortured and belittled them in front of her friends.
When they complained to Evan about Margaret's behavior, she would turn the table toward the kids, accusing them of misbehaving with the guest.
Even sided with Margaret to school the children.
Evan was mortified. The children despised Evan and asked him to leave immediately, and Evan pleaded with me to convince the children to please reconcile. But I reminded him that I never wanted to get back with him, and my definition of a happy family was my children, not some low-light husband who abandoned me after my accident. Evan accused me of tricking him to get the children back. Well, I might sound evil, but I wanted Evan to confess everything to the children instead of me uncovering him. The children rebuked and hated him in same ways as I had imagined for so many years.
This was the kind of revenge I've always wanted.
I let my children do all the talking, and trust me, it feels way more humiliating to be scorned by your children than by your spouse. I wanted to see that pain and grief in Evan's eyes. Evil. I know. I don't care. The children wanted me to stay, and now since they're adults, they get to choose. Neither the kids nor I want Evan in our life, but he does not seem to understand that we don't need him. He still expects the same respect from us as earlier, and I told him that if he wanted, he could stop paying for the children's education. I could afford it now. My father asked him to leave the house now, and said that we meet in court, and if he wanted to discuss anything,
Evan used to threaten my dad in the same way when he tried to reach my children. It's funny how life takes a full circle. It's been months since that day. The children continued to stay in the dorm as their college and school was a little far from my place, but they visit me often during the week and spent the weekends with me. I know I have missed the opportunity to be with them in their growing years, but I'm proud that my children grew up to be honest and kind teenagers. Evan has not contacted us since that day, and I'm glad he did not. He's living the life he dreaded, so I'll update you guys if something builds up. Update number 2. Hey there. Thanks for all the support. Like most of you mentioned that if we don't avenge our injustices, karma does, and it is bitter. I've started believing in it. First of all, sorry that I could not update you in the last 6 months because of my hectic schedule. Everything was moving smoothly, and I was just happy to have my children back in my life. My boutique was doing decent. My children advised me to start selling my products on e-commerce platforms. They helped me set up something called a virtual store, which kicked off quite well. This was my primary reason that I was MIA. 2 months later, that day, I'll call it the confrontation day, Evan showed up again. His face was flashing red and his eyes were fuming angrily, and I was perplexed. He said that he had caught Margaret sleeping with another man inside of the home. Instead of being ashamed and guilty, Margaret displayed entitled behavior, and guess what? Kicked Evan out of the house. Evan urged me to take him back, stating he cared for me when I needed him. By taking care, he meant paying the bills after my accident. And he also gave the best education and lifestyle to my children, so I should pay back my gratitude by supporting him during this time. I reminded him that he was kicked out of the house by his own foolishness. Even so, he still has a job that pays him a decent living. He said that he was not doing well in his professional life. Technology at the workplace has been upgraded quite rapidly, and he is in his 50s. It's pretty difficult for him to grasp these new concepts. The newbies are overshadowing the senior ones, and he's just reduced to being a mediocre employee. I made it clear that whatever it be, I won't take him back. He deserved every ounce of what he was getting, and he insisted on me for a second chance, and I reminded him of how he called me a cripple and a handicap when it was no fault of mine. He left with teary eyes, and 2 weeks later, Evan's sister, Lucy, came by to visit me. I'm guessing Evan would have given her the address, and she hugged and congratulated me on standing up on my feet. Well, not literally. She flattered me, saying how proud and content she felt to see me so successful. Despite my misery, I tried to be civil with her initially, but when she continued with her sugar-coated words, I replied sarcastically that a wheelchair-bound woman, disdained such praises. She bit her tongue. I asked her the reason for her sudden visit, and that was her first ever visit after my divorce from Evan. She'd never called me, and she visited me once after my accident in the hospital, and our last conversation was over the phone when I called her to plead with her to help me reconcile with Evan and my children. She said nothing was purposeful about her visit, and she was just missing me. I lost my patience, told her to cut the crap out and tell me the exact reason for her visit. She then admitted that she was there to convince me to reconcile with Evan. She narrated how Evan is slipping into depression, living in an apartment alone. She recounted how Evan has worked hard all his life to provide good education and lifestyle to his children. When he is in misery, the children should help him cope with depression.
I asserted that I have all the right to not let the children meet Evan as he did when he was in power. However, I don't intend to be a monster. I asked her to speak to the children, and if they're willing to be with their father, I'm not going to object. The children are grown-ups now and should be allowed to decide for themselves. She understood my subtle hint that I was digging into the past where my children were manipulated and forbidden to meet their mother. She left, saying that she would speak to the children directly. My children came to visit me the following weekend and narrated their meeting with Aunt Lucy. They aptly berated and rebuked her for her snarky statements about my disability. They said that she and Evan deserved the way Margaret treated them because they always turned a blind eye when Margaret mentally tortured them. The children told me that soon after Evan's second marriage, Lucy visited the house to meet her new sister-in-law. But Margaret gave her the cold shoulder and said that she does not like to attend to uninvited guests at her home. Lucy left the house feeling humiliated. My children told me strictly not to entertain them. After knowing all the hidden truth from my children, I realized how pathetic this brother-sister combo was. They have not contacted us since, and the last I heard about Evan was that he was seen lurking in town alone after work, probably just to kill off his loneliness. So, usually stories like this have a bit of mixed emotions, but I'll be completely honest with you guys. Almost everyone in the comment section was on OP's side. They were saying, you know what? OP had to go through so much. She lost the ability to walk. She had very dark thoughts and she had to get through deep depression. She had her kids abandoned from her because of the lies from her ex-husband. And finally, the person that was supposed to stay with her and love her till death do them part decided to abandon as well. So I just want to hear from you guys. Do you agree with all the commenters who were basically saying OP did nothing wrong and, well, her ex-husband deserved every bit of karma that he got at the end of the story? Drop it in the comment section. Let's discuss it. I hope you guys had a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you want more daily videos, all you gotta do is hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one, and remember, it's cool to be kind.